Good morning, folks. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you find yourself in the world. This is Flying with Will. And as per usual, I am Will. Today, I am on with a very dear friend of mine, Mr. David Eini. And as you will discover shortly, there's a very good reason I asked him to be my guest today. So Dave, I'm going to allow you then the opportunity to tell us a little bit about who you are and how you fit into the grander thing that we call society and the world at large.
Cool. Thank you for handing over. Well, I'm actually curious as well because I'm not really prepared for this, but I'm curious to see what comes of this. So my name is David. I am the founder of Pandor Digital. It is a marketing agency in South Africa. We help quite a lot of businesses. We've helped businesses such as Dotcher get on the map. So yeah, I think I'm also involved in a couple of other ventures, with Cape Town Jobs, really trying to help individuals find jobs, broadens people's awareness and really get the message out there. And I think this is a beautiful platform to have this opportunity with Will. So that's a bit about me.
Dave, I think you're being quite modest today. I think Mr. Eini has got a whole lot more on the back burner that we may or may not find out more about today. But yeah, no, absolutely. I am 100% on board with him. I can definitely give him my endorsement, which is to say this man, when he doesn't know about digital marketing, is isn't worth knowing. I, for one, have learned a lot from him. And yeah, no, definitely one of the one percenters. Except in this case, we can say that it's the good one percenters. It's the one percenters you actually want to be part of.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm not that rich.
Not yet. We're getting there.
Yeah, working there. Doing it the right way. That's the important thing.
Well, Dad, we've landed on a very monumental one. For those of you who don't know, today is a national day of shutdown, apparently in South Africa. And apparently it's all in aid of getting people employment and telling our good government that what they're doing is not good enough. And yet I woke up this morning to crickets chirping. It seems to be a lot of bluster and saber rattling. But the revolutionary types that are supposedly we're going to shut down every business and let us all know that we shouldn't be standing in their way. Well, I think there's more of the keyboard warriors out today than there are actually people in the street. But well, I suppose if you want to remain relevant and you've got a 9% party, then that's the way to do it. I mean, bad press is good press, I suppose, the way they say it.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. I mean, as well, I follow a couple of groups on Telegram that are a bit under the radar, if I can say, that isn't mainstream media. Yeah, I must say I found it quite interesting. I know there was a couple of things happening here and there with certain towns in and around South Africa. But they very quickly dispersed. And I know that, there was about, I don't know how accurate this information is. I mean, these are from certain underground groups on Telegram, but they were saying they confiscated around 24,000 tires already, that the EFF has tried to put tires and block, a lot of infrastructure and stuff. But I think that there's been a lot of pushback, as well from the police services and everything, to try and disperse everything. There's been a few flare-ups here and there, but I think, yeah, the general thing is that there are crickets all around and that there isn't really as much of a uproar, which is to me quite funny. I think that, it's a bit early in the day to say, but, it's kind of like this is backfiring on the EFF a bit here.
It seems that way. I find it a little ironic, though, if you consider that the folks that usually go and collect these tires for the purposes of recycling, they'll usually make about 300 Rand a tire. Now, if you take the numbers that you've been putting out there, Dave, and they're not wrong, I've seen those similar numbers myself, it's counterintuitive. You think that they'd probably go and trade them in and, provide someone with a bit of income for the day or something to that effect. which is precisely what they say that they're trying to action. And yet the actions that they are taking are wholly contrary to the message. I sometimes don't understand these people.
Yeah, I think, you know, you get certain political parties that are a little bit more covert and a little bit more wiser with how they convey their message across. And I think that, you know, with regards to the EFF, I mean, if you're looking at the narrative from a couple of years ago to what it is now on social media, how, you know, a few years ago they were saying, you know, kill the white man and, you know, one bullet, one white man or something to that line. And then all of a sudden, you start to see posts on social media saying that, you know, coming across as, well, you know, do you hate Julius Malema more than you hate load shedding? And they're trying to get people on their side after making those sort of statements. And I think that they are clearly showing their level of ignorance towards people. And you know, I can't help but feel that, you know, people that are like that, I think, are the most dangerous because they don't know if they're sitting left or if they're sitting right. Essentially, what I'm concluding of it is that they are just willing to tell everybody what they want to hear in order to get into that position. But, you know, their clear intention about what they really want, the fact that they have proven to be incongruent multiple times, makes them a very risky party. And unfortunately, I think that they're riding on the backs of, you know, ignorant people and, you know, people buying into their narrative and, you know, falling right into their palm of their arms, of their hands. And they're essentially doing what they want with it. Who knows what their real intentions are when they do get into power, or if they get into power.
It's interesting that you mentioned that particular line that you did about the ESCOM and do you hate the people more than you hate the blackouts? Because that was put out by one of our senior advocates in this country, Mr. Dali Mpofu. Now, how that guy became a silk, I don't know. I don't know whose hand he had to shake or shake down or whatever, but you know, he's famous for losing a lot of his cases. I think that's basically what that man comes down to. And he always ends up seemingly to be representing a little bit more dodgy types in our society. So yeah, I don't know if you're kind of sitting on the wrong side of the narrative, he's the guy to call apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good contact to have, I guess. You know, if you ever get in trouble and looking to lose your case and get into more trouble, just give him a call, you know.
Folks, if you didn't know up to now, and I mean I don't know what rock you've been hiding under, right? So the thought processes in South Africa at the moment are that we kind of are run a bit by like a mafia state, which is to say, you know, our government behaves a lot like one would expect the Cosa Nostra to carry on, except instead of you know, calling your godfather, I don't know, godfather, they go around calling each other comrade. Now, that's embarrassing enough considering that the last time we heard people calling each other comrade was back in the days of East Germany when you know, the Berlin Wall was still up. But you know, these guys have seemed to be in a vacuous little bubble, and it seems to work for them, or at least I suppose if you've got a whole country that you can call your own personal piggy bank, then you know, what do you care? But that's effectively how we have it at the moment. Uh,
Yeah. I actually I find it quite funny. A while back there were some pictures of Malema and his crew, and how they're all like in this militarized, you know, gear, but they're standing there with BB guns, you know, not real weapons. And I always find it quite funny. You know, again, it's just portrays the sort of narrative and how they want to be seen, but actually, what are they under? You know, all of that gear and everything. It's plastic. It's fake. And I find that quite funny. I mean, you know I'm reflecting quite a bit on the state of affairs and, you know, just my opinions on the matter and just from all the research I've done. But I must say this, just to kind of throw the spanner in the works here. Um, you know, I think it takes a very wise person to say this, that we actually don't know what's going on in the background. You know, we don't know what if this entire thing, if this is not just puppeted, if it's not just an act, if it's not just the ANC laying this potential foundation for, you know, the EFF to take over, which they might be taking over. We don't know. I mean, I saw something the other day that was saying, you take 100 black ants, you take 100 red ants, you put them in a jar together, it's perfectly fine. But you take the jar and you start to shake it, they're going to start attacking each other. And I find that, how much of that influence, is taking place and who's shaking the jar. And I'm sure there's got to be some level of it. I mean, I don't want to be completely ignorant and say that isn't happening at all, but to what extent is that happening? And I think that trying to figure out that truth, and especially with what the Root was saying about ESCOM and how, everything we knew, and to our, like all the South African in our gut, we kind of knew that there was, a little bit of, something funny. We all know that there's funny business in our government, but the fact that he came out with it and confirmed everything, I mean, essentially means that, I mean, they tried to assassinate him, with cyanide. It just shows you the sort of mindset and mentality of the people that are really behind the scenes. And I mean, if they're willing to go to those lengths to exterminate people, to try and hush them down, you got to question, how safe are we, for even speaking out like this? I mean, I think we're all at a point where we just don't care. I think that we're at a point now where we need to see change, where, we are willing to put our own safety, to say, well, something is absolutely wrong here, and things need to change. I think that's the main thing, is that people do need know that there needs to be change. And many times I've been in conversations, around with people that, as soon as I highlight certain things or share my opinion, they quickly turn around and say, well, what are you going to do about it? And I think the important thing is to talk about it, to really embrace what's going on. I don't have a solution for everybody to say, hey, this is the direction and thing we need to do. I think the right solution is a solution that everybody can agree on, that people can start speaking about it and say, well, yes, we can, of course, we do need to love each other, and, we do need to take care of each other and try to help each other as much out as possible and unify. I think that our solution is in the one thing that, government does their absolute best to try and destroy, and that's the unification of us. So I think that is a start, is that, if we start to unify and find ways to unify with each other, the thing that they don't want us to have, obviously there's a big reason for it. And I think with unity, that's truly when we'll set ourselves free. That's truly when, we're essentially a big group that is now working together, and we're writing our own narrative, and we're not just, following the narrative that is being laid out in front of us, and everybody's just going to have their opinion around a created narrative that is designed, with a war plan and a specific agenda that is definitely not in anybody's best interest, but the few that created that narrative.
Yeah, no, look, that much is very evident at this point. I think the government is waking up to the fact that the last I looked, the number that they put out for the entire complement of our military in this country, for example, was about 75,000. Now, when 2 or 3 million people rock up at the union buildings with pitches, with torches and pitchforks, then those 75,000 strong military is not really going to mean much, unless they are prepared to go full kind of Tiananmen Square on these people, which is to say they can no longer ignore then those voices. They can no longer just pretend like they don't mean anything. I think up to now, we've had a lot of politicians that have kind of just thought, well, if we put out what they want to hear, that is now the masses, then we can kind of keep them quiet and keep them in line, and they'll do what we say, and so on and so forth. But I think more and more, I mean, let's not be naive. We know that politicians, after they've given their rants and their vents and whatever in terms of the party they belong to and the party line, they're all going out afterwards and having whiskey and beers together, and having a good old time, which is to say, one more day in the bag, one more day toward the next payday, which is to say, we making so much more than the average South African citizen does in this country for doing what exactly? I don't know if anyone could actually nail that down. And the more the water gets muddied in terms of the conversation, the more ministers and things that seem to want to bring on board. We now have in this country, if for those of you who do not know, a minister for electricity based on the back of Andre de Ruyter's speech in terms of what was wrong at ESCOM. If he'd never given that speech, I doubt we would have had a minister of electricity. But just him highlighting the fact that the ruling party is so much up to their neck in dirty dealings, they can't be seen to be doing nothing. Now, unfortunately, in South Africa, we don't have a very intelligent population. According to the last census, our average IQ here is about 77, which I might highlight is about 7 points ahead of being a clinical idiot. So, yeah, they're not the brightest bulbs in the block, bless them, but there are a lot of them. And even a stupid person eventually will wake up to what's happening. And at that point, then they're done. Then their party is over. And I mean, it's been going for 30 years. So it's been a pretty slow, frog in the simmering pan type of a boil. But I do think that they're waking up to it. I actually do believe that. What do you reckon, Dave?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that, just based on everything that I've also just gone on my journey of research, and what you're saying really lines up, with my perception and my gut feeling inside is that, and I think it's because we're starting to see, the narrative, everything is changing. I see a lot more black activists coming up, and a lot of them are defending and are against these sort of agendas. And I think that they're there because, when I hear them speak and when I see how they talk, is that they're just aware of multiple data points, is that they look at a certain, situation unraveling, and they start to ask questions. They don't just take things just on face value and say, well, this is coming from a place that I trust, and therefore I'm not going to ask any questions. I think they're starting to ask questions because, it's always a different story. It's always, it's like they're being lied to as clear as daylight. And I think that is one of the biggest dangers of rapport. If we have to dive into the idea of what rapport is and how it's a dangerous double-edged sword, it can be, and how, when you're in rapport with something, is that you start to become very blinded to it. And I think that, for many years now, there's certain individuals out there that say, people are lacking to critically think. And I think one of the very important things for success in any level in this world is to have an ability to critically think. And also, I just to also mention this as well, what I'm finding quite odd is that all of a sudden, I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but I don't remember the last time we were in stage 1 load shedding. All of a sudden, it's going from, we are out of capacity and the machines are damaged and all of these sort of things, to the EFF flaring up, and all of a sudden, politically now we have electricity. So I think it really raises more questions in my mind to ask, is this an actual, a problem of a physical problem, or is it actually just a political driven issue, which I know it is, but it's just more evidence, to prove that there's actual people and there's motivations and political motivations behind all of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you got to remember though, Dave, that we're in an election year. So next year, people are going to go and decide who next to give our power to, which is essentially what we do every 5 years. And we that are the stupid people that haven't actually woken up to that fact yet. We basically go and put our little cross on the line to say, well, we're going to now naively assume that this party who's promised all these things is going to be living up to all those promises made, which, as we know, never happens. But we, like lemmings, go and follow the processes every 5 years again and again and again. And then we look at those people that decide one day, well, actually, I don't really feel like being part of this process anymore, because I just end up feeling stupid. To say that, oh, yeah, no, you're apathetic, and if you don't make your voice heard, then you have no right to complain. Well, I don't really know if that's so valid anymore as an argument if you see how the processes go. Now, you mentioned that we've now recently started having stage 1 load shedding, which of course they tell you we must all be so grateful for, because it's only stage 1. But most functioning countries would tell you that no, we still are having blackouts, and the fact that we're having blackouts should still be a reason to make our voices heard and say, no, 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 hang on, people, this is not cool. But then this is just gaslighting, right? So they're just trying to, underscore the fact that this is not so bad. We can survive like this. We can keep on. If it stays like this, we okay. Which, of course, we know is not the case, but they will write that particular narrative and put it up in a headline in some newspaper, and then we as a society will go, "Oh yeah, you see now it's written up in mainstream media, so it must be true." Which, again, we know is nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading somewhere as well that I think that, since we had COVID, I know during either 2020, I think we went down GDP by 17%. And I think the last year or so, we've only increased by 1% GDP. And I think that everyone is feeling it. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're in business, I know the difference of what sort of business and the amount of clients we were onboarding prior to this, which was maybe like 2019. Even during COVID, it was still okay. But then all of a sudden, the last year or so, I find that all these upcoming businesses, I'm not talking about the 1%ers that are established and, essentially own, a majority of the real estate everywhere. So I'm talking about the upcoming individuals. And, I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on here, but, if we're talking about the global reset, it's clearly, I'm finding that a lot of businesses, small and medium businesses, are, unless they're coming from an environment of a lot of capital, they to onboard clients, to sell their products. I'm not talking about, the one or two over here and there that, are able to, they come up with a new innovative product. They've spent many years developing it, and there's a demand for it. I'm talking about, real genuine business people, really wanting to get something off the ground. I'm finding that, the ability for your average business owner to fork up a certain retainer or certain amount to invest in their business, I'm finding that a lot of people are struggling with liquid assets, liquid money. And it's actually quite disappointing, because I know a lot of people, they want to start their business. They want to do certain things. I spend full time, doing what I do. And, the last couple of months, there's crickets literally in the economic side of the world. However, I can say this, hence the fact that I think targeting international businesses has been, I mean, if I look at, majority of the revenue we've achieved in the last 2 years, I'll say about 80% has come from international. And we've been doing majority of our marketing, in fact, 95% of our marketing locally. So what does that say, about the economic space in South Africa? I'm not obviously speaking about every single industry and every single vertical and every single channel, but I'm just saying it is something that I've personally observed. And, the data and the statistics are, they are showing for it. Quality of life for your average person over the last year or two has degraded drastically. And especially, with the uprising of artificial intelligence, I don't want to be one of those people that goes out there and says, hey, we should all, fearmonger and all this stuff. But I think that there is definitely some interesting things. I think my concern with it is that, there is no attempt to try and regulate it in any government or any form of environment. I know that, back in the day, about 10, 15 years ago, again, putting on my tinfoil hat here, I know there was a lot of discussions about, trying to create, centralizing income and currency. I know the US is already federalized, and there's a ton of banks out there that work with the US bank. I think ever since the dollar and the gold have depegged, that's essentially when capitalists really started to infiltrate, every single economy. And yeah, I mean, I'm just throwing a lot of things out there that I know certain people are listening, and they understand, certain things of what I'm saying. And if they've done research based on the headings and the topics that I'm mentioning now, I think they would probably be very aligned with me. If there's a person that's listening to this that doesn't quite understand or grasp exactly what I'm saying, I suggest that maybe listen back to some of the headlines and the topics of what I say and just do your own research on it. I think that's the best thing that anybody can do. Don't take anybody's word for anything. It's always good to hear other people's perspectives, especially when it's data driven and it comes from a certain place. But I urge every single person to please do their own research and see what they find out. And that's the whole thing about everything is enlightenment, to meet together, to talk about these things, to debate certain things. I think that's very healthy to figuring out the truth. And I think that if everybody aligns to being a truth fighter, we'll be living in such a beautiful place because you have to be critical and you have to think critically in order to try and figure out the truth. And you have to look at things in a very specific way. And you can have 1,000 people looking at something in one way, but the person that's looking for the truth will probably figure out the most amount about that system or how that thing works, and that inspires a lot of ideas for anything you do in life. I mean, that to me is how you want to get wise, figure out the truth of the truth of things.
Dave, you've highlighted a lot of points here. Firstly, let's start at the beginning, right? So, we've observed in the United States recently two banks that now have had a run on them that have potentially failed. I know there was talk about a government bailout, but then the question gets asked of the president, are you going to be bailing out every single small, state bank that folds in the future? And he didn't answer that question. In fact, he couldn't head for the door fast enough, because I'm sure he knows as well as we do that money supply is finite. It's not as though they can just go, well, they can go and print more, obviously, but that's how they got into this problem to begin with. So just to give you the broad strokes, folks, you had Silicon Valley Bank as well as another one, whose name escapes me now, but they effectively failed. There was a run on the bank. They couldn't service their clients. They had to lock their doors. It was a mess. And this goes back to subprime. So 2008. So for those of you who don't know about that, and again, I ask what rock you've been hiding under. Back then, the topical product was real estate, and people were getting loans basically on that real estate in order to purchase it because they thought that this now was a big property boom. And the bottom fell out of it, and eventually those loans became more than what the actual property was worth. And at that point, the whole system just collapsed. And we probably are still feeling the vestiges of that now. Now, what happened most recently is that we've had a similar thing happen, except now it's not been property, now it's government bonds. So for the longest time, effectively the last 13 odd years, the banks have had to survive in a near to 0%, basically what they charge you on your interest rates on your loans. Banks make money off interest rates, right? So they give you a loan, and every month you're paying them back whatever you loan from them, but also you're paying them back the juice on that particular money. And for 13 years, they've now had to take out riskier and riskier positions just to basically make the same profits as they did before, because of course we know that bankers need to earn their yearly bonuses and stock options and pay for the new toy in the garage. So this is now what's been happening. And now that's interest rate cycle, because of the president of America having this really interesting economic policy that he has had, which has caused the American dollar to depreciate more than it has in the last 40 odd years. Now, the only way to stem that is to raise interest rates again. But now, when that happens, then the government bonds that the banks have been investing in become worth less than what they invested. And now we're having subprime all over again. And up to now, the big four in America, that would be the big four banks, used to be big five, remember? And then Bear Stearns, I think it was, back in the subprime days, they collapsed under the weight of that. But they've been fortunate in that the government has basically propped them up artificially up till now. The problem that we have is that, as I've said before, money is finite and they can't keep doing it forever. So now, like David also said, we're now looking at things like where perhaps you're looking at digital currency solutions. And we've seen this in China, where people get digital currencies extended to them, but then as soon as someone steps on the toes of the Chinese Communist Party, they get their assets frozen. And the fear is now that the American powers that be will adopt that sort of a policy as well. Because again, now, at the risk of putting on my own tinfoil hat, the Chinese model is something that the Biden administration actually holds in quite high esteem. Be it that they call themselves communist, which of course we know is not the truth. They are not a bog standard communist organization at all. But they do have certain policies in place which keeps the people in power in power. The going narrative is in China, you can get rich, you can get famous, you can do whatever you want, just don't criticize the politician types. And more we're seeing this on social media now with the American lot, where just last year they effectively wanted to instill a quote unquote ministry of truth to police things like Twitter and weaponize things like the Homeland Security Department and the likes of the FBI. That becomes a little bit of a worry because now we're heading into the realms of dystopia, right? So the thing with wearing a tinfoil hat, and we say this tongue in cheek, but if you're calling every conspiracy a theory, I think you're missing the point. Because I do believe that not every conspiracy is a theory. Yeah, no, not you, Siri. Anyways, yes, rudely interrupted. So the question then comes back down to this: what is truth and what is not? Now, that depends on what side of that particular argument you're sitting on as well. Because if you're the lefty and you believe in everything that the government is saying, and we stand by them shoulder to shoulder, which frankly I think is barking mad. You'd expect that more from a right winger, actually, if you think about it. But yet that's what the left's become. I think where the right is at the moment is far more central than most people would care to admit, because in America they love talking about January 6th and how these people are all a bunch of, I don't know, bordering on Nazi types or fascists at the very best or least, or whatever you want to call it. But we're living in a world now where more and more this stuff is becoming part of our zeitgeist, which is to say part of our lived reality. And you said something about AI, Dave, and I find that interesting too, because I've been playing around on ChatGPT, and I must tell you that ChatGPT is woke, which is to say you can ask it certain questions which it won't answer. It'll tell you that it's wholly inappropriate. It'll tell you that it's offensive to some. And that's what we're arguing against, right? We want people to be able to have that hard conversation, which is why we don't shy away from politics and sex and religion, because we should be mature enough as a society, as people, as individuals, to be able to respectfully have those conversations. Now, economics 101, hey, Dave. I mean, as soon as the cost of production becomes more than the outcome that you're expecting, your return on your investment, at that point your model changes. So how much longer are we going to have human beings doing the job that a computer or a program can do for free, effectively?
Yeah, I think that we are heading into very unknown, excuse my phone, extremely unknown times. In the sense that I think that AI is going to at some point take over majority of jobs. And I mean, call me, just my thought process on it is, if I look at how capitalists are currently today, I think the whole censorship of the internet is something that started a good couple of years ago, and especially with the US. I've been censored many times on platforms for just speaking my opinion. But I think that we are entering a world that is becoming extremely liberal. I think that, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And what that means is, is that we're so liberal to the point that, you know, you can't even say something. I mean, it's maybe even the opposite of liberal. That, you know, you say something and then you get crucified for it, or, you know, you say something, you know, from 10 years ago. I remember there was video games, and, you know, the way people were speaking, and, you know, somebody could say the word, like, you know, as part of the slang was like, hey, you gay, or something like that. But nowadays you do something like that in certain states, in certain countries, and you'll get arrested for it. I think that, you know, that to me is, it's a big problem, and I think there is a lot of degeneracy out there. I think that people are actually, you know, not getting wiser over time. I think that technology is making things way too easy for people, that they're not relying on activating and utilizing certain parts of the brain as per, you know, neuroscience. And I think that's having a direct impact on human intelligence, you know, as a cognitive as a whole. And, you know, the degradation of IQ and EQ, all these things. I mean, you know, just like anything, if you're not going to use it, you're going to lose it. And I think that is something that's unfortunately happening, is that, you know, people are naturally, I mean, if we understand electricity, it likes to find the path of least resistance. And I think giving into that, you know, is really changing the narrative of, you know, what is a masculine figure, what is a feminine figure, which was very clearly defined, you know, a good couple of years ago. But I think that that entire narrative, with all this convenience of technology, and, you know, the ability for people to physically change their appearances, you know, it's actually quite, I don't know if confoculating is the right word here, but I think that, you know, people are literally, you know, in my opinion, losing the plot a bit. You know, I think that there's a lot of craziness going on around. And yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting, and I think AI specifically is a lot more of a threat and a danger, as much as it can also be a convenience. You know, and something that can really help us. But I mean, just looking at sort of the direction of which I'm speaking now, and, you know, if things are already to the point where there's automation and, you know, degeneracy, that I truly believe it roots from, you know, things being too easy, and click button generation. I mean, you know, we already started seeing people talking, like, you know, in their 50s and 60s, when we were still very young, you know, saying, you know, they're all spoiled this. And I understand every generation is a little bit different, but I think the gap between, you know, 10 years, you know, 100 years ago, 10 years in a generational gap would have been, you know, not too much of a difference, or even 20 years. But nowadays, with just the fast paced, how everything is evolving and changing, 10 years is like an entire, you know, it's like 20, 30 years of a generational gap of information and habits. And, you know, just the changes are so vast. And I think it's creating a huge identity problem in the world. I think the whole world is you know, especially in like, if you look at central London, if you're just walking down the street there, you know, and you just see everybody's just in their own vibe, in their own sort of world, with how they're interacting, and, you know, how everyone is like, they're showing dead animals there because they're pushing for veganism. You're seeing over there, people are complaining and protesting about this and that, and these people are over there. You know, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just saying that there's a lot more, people are a lot more selfish and focused on their own individualism, rather than the whole and the collective. And, you know, I mean, again, I'm going to drop this headline out there, but, and I know MK Ultra is a quite a long, vast scheme of testing and, you know, national security. But I think, you know, dive into it. You know, there was actually specific tests that was done, you know, to see how do we destabilize economies. Well, one of the things that they figured out, and this is from leaked classified documents from the US government, is that you take multiple different cultures, you know, different, you know, people from different social environments, and you put them into one town. You know, they don't have rapport with each other, and business doesn't thrive, and it creates a big destabilization. People start to lose their identity. And I can't help but feel that this is happening on a mass scale, you know, around the world, all around us. Essentially, it amounts to tyranny and to anarchy. And I think that we're currently going down a slippery slope, you know, globally. You know, every country's got their problems. You know, governments are really resorting to a lot of tyranny in the way they're doing things. And I think that, yeah, I mean, just like the great Roman Empire and, just like history has repeated itself multiple times, I think if you want to get a nice indicator of where we're heading, have a look at history. But based on my analysis and looking at history, I think that, it takes there's a saying that says, bad times make strong men. And something to the extent of, I can't actually recall it 100%, but it's something about weak men. Strong times make weak men, or something like that. I'm not getting it right, but I know that we're going through a period of time where men aren't men anymore. Is that people are a lot more weaker in their ability to hold their critical thinking, just as a general thing. People's ambitions, they're too lazy to do things. They are just we're in a very weak space, I think, as a global society. And I think things need to get a bit worse. Unfortunately, that's just how Mother Nature wants it to be. It needs to get a bit worse before it can get better. But without a doubt, I'm a firm believer in a bell curve graph, and whatever goes down must go up, and vice versa. And I think the universe always finds a way of balance and to restore balance. And I think, yeah, we need to see some more degradation before we're going to see some positive. And unfortunately, I don't think there's anything that, as an individual, anybody can do. But it's a collective thing. I think that's just how nature wants it to be. And if you want to take some information out of the Buddhist handbook, it's to really just sit there and observe. And the best thing you can do is to just be positive, is to keep your own psyche in a positive mind, is to do the best that you can every day, be a student of learning, go out there. The most important thing is that you are satisfied as an individual, doing what makes you happy and getting you closer. And, to some degree, you need to just ride the wave. You can't control the wave. If you try, you're going to lose the plot. But if you are just riding it, and you're just in control of the things that you can be in control over, and you can get onto that into a right term where you understand that, I think you'll find a very nice way to glide through it, and you'll probably achieve a lot more success than you think is possible if you just ride it the way it wants to be ridden.
Wow, Dave. Yeah, no, lots of rabbit holes there. I'll tell you what, and going down any one of them could pretty much end up being a conversation for the ages. I will say this, you mentioned history and the lessons of history, it never ceases to amaze me how little people seem to learn from what came before. I think back in terms of the things I've investigated for myself, and one of those things that right now sits pretty salient. I mean, we've talked about economies of the world and how it's monkey see, monkey do, and they seem to think that it happened to that bunch that came before, but it won't happen to us. No, no, no. We're okay. And if you look at back during the times of the Crusades, right? So you had Europe, especially Germany at that point, where you had the Jewish diaspora in a lot of German cities kind of set up little enclaves. Now, it posed a unique solution to a problem because now bearing in mind, back in those days, the church was the guys that had the say-so, right? They were the big political institution of the day. And everything that they legislated for had some kind of a biblical underlining. And one of the things was that if we are going to be bankers, then we who hold ourselves up as a Christian society have to adhere to what's written in the Bible. And the Bible says that you cannot lend to your brother and ask him for interest. It's sinful. It's avarice. So they kind of looked across the street at the enclave of Jewish folk and said, well, they like us. They're sort of like us. We kind of follow the same scripture, but loosely. So we can talk to them because then we make them our bankers. At that point, we can get money from them and we can pay them back and we can pay interest to them and we don't have to have this little crisis of conscience. And yet it wasn't very long after where that group of people starts becoming very successful and good at what they do in a job that was given to them by the powers that be. Now all of a sudden it's blowing up in their collective faces, and now all of a sudden they have this stereotype that now has been with us since then to this day. And I kind of look at the world we have today. Now you talk about forced integration and societies becoming this multicultural, mishmash of different people. And we all go, we're cheering along. We're going, oh, that's so cosmopolitan. That's so, progressive. We really are coming of age as a society. But that's not seeing the wood for the trees, because what you're having in a lot of areas of the world then is you're getting refugees from these hotspots, war zones, whatever you want to call it, centers of tyranny, and they bring along the same values that set up those tyrannical autocratic governments to begin with. And then you're saying to people, these people come from, where they're really having it hard, and their lives are under threat, and under, their governments want to persecute and prosecute and all that sort of stuff. Now you must welcome them in with open arms. And we saw this happen a few years back when we had the first little, I don't know what you can call it, exodus out of the Middle East into Europe. And we saw these long lines of people just walking right across Europe. And people were coming out of their houses and giving them bottled water. And they were saying, hey, welcome to this, welcome to freedom, wada, wada, wada. And yet since then, all the headlines have been stark in that they've been for all the wrong reasons. There was a case that I read of just the other day in Sweden where some guy from Syria had raped a girl and they wanted to prosecute him. And he turns around and he says, well, in my culture, I'm allowed to do whatever I like to that girl because she's a girl. Now, I find that problematic because how can we then, as this progressive, freedom-loving society, welcome in this Trojan horse that contains all these people with this value system that is wholly indifferent to ours, in fact, quite antagonistic, if truth be told, welcoming those people then with open arms, which is to say, we take your burden, we understand where you're coming from, we will make, you can come make a better life for yourself. And now you look at areas, for instance, within the UK, in Birmingham, where there's no-go areas, where now they're so firmly rooted that even the police don't want to go in there because they fear for their lives, because these people are that aggressive and that's this antagonistic. And I look then to, certain places in the world that are now all of a sudden being called things like apartheid states because they don't want those people. And I've got to put a big question mark over that narrative, which is to say, who are we trying to kid here? If I have a culture that I adhere to, if I have a value system that I adhere to, that I value, well, that's why it's called a value system, right? Why would I then go out of my way to get people of a certain, let's say, contrary value system, contrary belief system, to come now and make it that my value system then becomes something evil, bad, wrong? Who's anyone to tell me that my values are wrong? Look, I'm playing devil's advocate to a large degree here because I do think that people, broadly speaking, are good, and people, broadly speaking, would want to do the right thing and treat their fellow human beings with whatever that they would want themselves: dignity, respect, all that good stuff. But then you look at the narrative now, the message that we get fed now by those same lefties, the ones that call themselves so liberal. I mean, I called myself a liberal once. It was back when Bill Clinton was in charge of America, that is. Because I thought, live and let live. Let's all, be a brotherhood of man, as John Lennon once put in his song. Well, the outworking is a little different to what's written on paper. And I find that more and more often, me being, well, I call myself a Christian conservative, But I'm, like I said before, I'm way more to the center now than what the so-called liberals ever were. And remembering that that little line where to your extreme right or to your extreme left, you find fascism. Well, I must tell you, that's not a line, that's a circle. If you're going far enough around that circle, you hit fascism. And I don't care where you started. Which is to say, then it's my way or the highway. It's we've got the power and you'll do as we say. And this is why I've never been a big fan of the United Nations. Because the United Nations, while they'll put out this whole brotherhood of man bullshit that they do, excuse my French, in reality, unless you're on the what's that council? The Security Council, right? So you've got 5 nations that make up the permanent members. They've always got a say in everything. They're the big gorilla in the room. But if you're not in that Security Council setup, then you are literally on the out. And if you're in the out, now you've got to make up a power block for yourself. And what is the biggest power block outside of the Security Council? It's the non-aligned movement. And who makes up the majority of the non-aligned movements? Arab states. So for me, it's a hypocritical system because it affords power, albeit through the back door, then to people who openly wish that certain nations would cease to exist. And then you call me a racist and a bigot for standing behind that nation. So I ask you, where does it stop? Now, you mentioned Cape Town jobs before. I'm going full circle here, Dave. You mentioned Cape Town jobs before because this is something that you and I, we've identified as a need in our country. And it's a need that's not really being addressed to our satisfaction. I mean, how many people have we got out of work? 9 million, 10 million? I mean, I forget, but it's a lot of people. Where we've taken it upon ourselves to take of our time and of our skills and of our know-how and try and feed into that. And I'm quite proud of that. It's one of the reasons I'm very, very proud to have you on this podcast because I believe we are of a like mind. And anyone that wants to listen to this podcast and judge me, well, please, by all means, go right ahead. But what I'm trying to tell you is I'm, along with this man, trying to make a real difference in the world that I live in. Mm. And that is why I have so much respect for you, Dave. That's why I look to you as a kindred spirit. Because you are one of those guys who will have skin in the game, who will actually go out and actually do something. There's a lot of people, a lot of social justice warriors on their keyboards out there, right? All virtue signaling and all on of, check me out, I'm so wonderful, whatever. I'm not that guy. I don't particularly care what anybody says about me, but at the end of the day, I'll say this: you put goodness out into this universe, it'll come back to you. And I don't do it because I want to have anything come back to me. Don't get me wrong. This is not me treating life like a slot machine, but I will say this: I'm very proud to be associated with that particular project, and I really do believe that we've got a few more projects like that on the horizon. Whatever they might be, well, who's to say, right? But yeah, no, I'm really stoked about all that.
100%, anyway, and I think yeah.
I was going to hand over right back to you and say, well, I've tried to navigate a few of your rabbit holes, but yeah, let's hear from you again.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time, but yeah, I think it's right. I think at some point, when personally, I just don't understand it when you're seeing so much injustice and things that are not right, or people that have just accepted how life is and don't question it. For example, if a child grows up in a township environment and that's all they know, and all they get to see is these opportunities that they don't potentially have or they don't get proper education there. There's so many problems just in that environment that I personally try to find solutions to assist them. Even saying something like that can probably even get me in hot water. It's like, we live in such a time where no matter what you say, you could be, oh, you want to be like a white Jesus, or you want to be this. I think at some point, you just got to develop a very tough skin to all the haters, because the thing is, you are going to get haters. If you're successful, there's no such thing as being successful without haters. But a part of me also likes it because they kind of do get you more influence and they get you more exposure. And then the right people come along and they actually indirectly end up making you bigger. So at the end of the day, I think it comes down to this. If people are too shallow and just materialistic to have an ability to see past just on the physical, oh, he's doing this for this, oh, he's doing this for that. No, but as a genuinely good person, it will take a good person to recognize a good person. And I think that when you do things out of goodness, that it makes me happy, to help others, I get fulfilled in my journey, just like any other person. There's certain, we can feel anxious, we can feel anxiety, we can feel, depression, we can feel all of these things. And I think, as we navigate in life, I do ask myself, how much choice do I really have? It's not as if I can control anxiety. It's not as if I can control depression, but there's certain actions I can take, certain thoughts that can mitigate that. And one of those things, if I don't do things, if I don't move forward, and specifically, what is my highest level of enjoyment and happiness, and what direction of forward moving is that? It's to actually do something good, to leave a good impact in this world, and to be proactive about it. If I miss on those two elements, I'm actually robbing myself of my potential of happiness, of my potential of being the best version of myself, because that's how I tick. That is how the stimulus out in this world has helped configure the sort of person I am. And sure, our families and our mothers and our fathers have a big influence in that. And so that is how, there's a part of me that is how I am programmed, and I have to be real and stick to that no matter what the consequences are, because ultimately that is what makes me happy in this world. And gives me the most fulfillment, and at least to me, that's the path that really resonates with me. So yeah, I think that everybody needs to find their own path as well. Everyone is different, and I think that is the mix and the beauty of everything. I think that the biggest shame and the biggest robbery that you can ever have on yourself is not finding what that is to that individual. And I think the best way to figure that out is through pain, and through difficult times, and through throwing yourself into experiences, even if you're not going to like it, at least for a fact you're not going to like it. And really just being that sort of person. Just go walk in the forest, be an individual, make up your own mind on things. And I think just expose yourself to information. That is the only way you're going to unlock your true potential. And difficult times. You cannot achieve and be given handouts in this world. Everything needs to be attained. Some person is going to physically need to put physical work into things, mental work into things as well. Everyone's journey is different, and in that context, I don't think it's fair to judge anybody. You just kind of just accept it, and if people are doing good and bad. But that's the thing. Again, talking about trying to control outcomes. There's just for the amount of goodness that one person has, there's the opposite side in the world somewhere, and there is somebody that's negative. And again, this is where the Buddhist teaching is very nice, in the sense of, don't look at the white and the black and how they, what's that thing called, the yin and the yang. And so the whole idea with Buddhism, and one of those principles is, don't try to be on this side or this side, just observe. And I think sometimes at the right space and time, just observing something is the only thing. I mean, we should be doing this to ourselves every morning, at least 10-20 minutes, where we just sit in quiet in our own space. In fact, I bet that a lot of people watching this will probably struggle to sit in silence, in conscious silence, for about 10-20 minutes. It is pain, but I can tell you this: if you try it, you're going to feel a lot better. You're going to have a lot more order in this chaotic mind in the 21st century. And I think more times than ever now, we need to be in more quiet spaces within ourselves, and not always have an opinion or jump onto something. Just sit there, focus on your breath as these things come, and it just creates so much clarity. It really increases gray matter in the brain. This is proven by science. And it feels better. Your ability to critically think, you're a lot more sharper. Yeah, I mean, that's the best thing I can leave any of the viewers here with is, really do the research on meditation. I'm not saying go out there and meditate. I think that when somebody has a full picture, you want to be successful in life, develop that picture in your mind. How do you want to achieve it? What is it going to look like? When your mind can actually see every step of the way and the steps that you need to take, and it's actually realistic for it, you will then do it. But as soon as you give yourself unrealistic goals, unrealistic things that you want to achieve, you will fail to ignite any sort of flame. But the main thing is have a clear picture. And I think that meditation and getting that clear picture go hand in hand. Because again, people's short attention spans nowadays, they think of an idea, they really want to achieve it, they give up on it before it even turns into anything more, because it's just, I need it to be now. I need to click about it. I need to see it. But take your time with things, just like when you were a kid playing with Legos or something. You didn't, nobody does that nowadays. Everyone's on their phones and things like that. And I think, spend time building something, spend time doing 5 push-ups a day for a whole year, do something with your time, and over time, just watch this beautiful thing evolve. And that is nature's timing. Us in today's 21st century, we like to think that we can speed the clock up, but we can't. The body is designed in a certain way. And until Neuralink is Neuralink and there's more development with putting a chip in the brain and we can speed everything up, I think we just need to accept what we are, who we are. And if you really want to be the best version of yourself and achieve success, work with the process. There is no easy handouts and winning a lottery nonsense. Everybody had to work for what they have. I'm not saying that people don't get lucky out there, but if you're living a life as if you're going to get lucky, you're probably going to disappoint yourself. And that is literally probability right there.
Dave, it's as you say, there's not enough time on this particular iteration of the podcast to fully ventilate everything that we probably could. Definitely going to get you back at some point. But, just in closing, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to love, eh? It just comes down to the love that you have, not only for yourself, and just bearing in mind that it should probably start with yourself, but for your next person, whoever it might be, coming down the street that you've never met before. I mean, we've had this discussion. What if we found a comet that was on its way to Earth and it was going to strike in the next, let's say, 20 odd, 30 odd years? How would the human race not then rally around that and come together? And now all of a sudden, it's not this race and that race, but it's a human race, right? And at that point, we can all find a reason to care about one another and validate each other's right to exist and validate each other's just humanity, right? Because that, at the end of the day, is what we all are. And you're 100% correct. Although I must say that the whole thing of meditating when you're an old ADHD case like I am, well, that takes on its own unique challenges. But Dave, it's been a pleasure having you on today, and I want to say thanks for coming out and being part of the chats. And just quickly tell folks what you're in the pipeline of doing. Where if people want to have this conversation with you, or something relatable, where can we find you?
So you guys, I don't really have my own personal brand per se, out there yet. But I'll say, you're welcome to come through Pandor Digital. You're welcome to just send us a message on Messenger, or you can search me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn would probably be the best place to get hold of me. David, Eini. That's Echo India November India. You guys are welcome to hit me up, have a conversation, and if there's anything that you want to discuss or learn, or if you are in need of looking at marketing services for your business, or if you just want to network, I'm available, and I welcome you to send me a line.
Yeah, we'll certainly be dropping all those relevant addresses and things into the description. So yeah, people will be able to hit you up. And yeah, but once again, thanks, Dave, for being on again today. And we will certainly continue this discussion at some point because I know there's a lot to talk about. I mean, my experience of you, Dave, we could cover for days.
Yeah.
So, folks, wherever you are in the world, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Be well, be safe. Bye bye.